Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL Podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL Podcast, your podcast to cruise a little smarter. And I'd like to welcome back to the show my co-host, Christy. Christy, how are we today?
I'm great, Lake. How are you?
I am doing great. We are both very excited about this show. Something a little bit different for our listeners today. Not only are we branching out cruise lines, but we're doing a very different style of interview today.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Yes. So why don't we jump right into this? Christy, when we think of women in the cruise line industry, often we think of celebrity cruises and who?
Captain Kate.
Yes, we love Captain Kate and have spoken about her quite a bit on this show. However, what you may not know is that Captain Kate was actually appointed by our guest today. Not only that, she was involved in the development of Celebrity Edge class ships and really for the entire image and brand that we view celebrity cruises as today. But even more importantly, she helped increase the number of women working on celebrity cruises from 3% to over 30% today. She is the author of Making Waves, A Women's Rise to the Top Using Smarts, Heart, and Courage. Our guest today is Lisa Lutoff-Perlo, the first women president and CEO of Celebrity Cruises, as well as one of the first in the industry. Lisa, welcome to the show.
It is an absolute pleasure to be with both of you today, both Christy and Lake. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You know, I have such a special place in my heart for celebrity. I took my first celebrity cruise shortly after I passed the bar exam in 2003. I was in my 20s. I went with a girlfriend and we were the youngest on board by about 30 years at least. But we loved the food. We loved the service. We loved the cabins. And then my husband and I were looking to figure out our honeymoon about 10 years later. We went on the Solstice, did a sky suite for the first time.
Nice.
Oh my God, it was so lovely.
Nice.
And then about a year later, the Reflection was getting ready to come out and bookings were getting ready to start for that. I had become a travel agent at this point and was getting together a group. I was like, I'm going to have a baby and we're going to take this baby on the cruise. I wasn't pregnant yet. We booked a cruise on the Reflection and I booked this baby as a baby girl. I now have a 10-year-old son. I got pregnant at exactly the right moment so that I could take this baby on the cruise. And he was just 7 months old when he took his first cruise on Celebrity Reflection.
Wow.
Fast forward 10 years, we were on the Beyond about a year and a half ago. We've cruised the Edge. We've cruised the Apex. We are a Disney family, sure, but we love celebrity. When I saw you were doing interviews, I was like, I need to try to get Lisa on. And so thank you very much. It's a moment for me.
Oh, thank you. So glad you love celebrity. So glad you wanted to have me on. And like I said, it's really a pleasure to be here. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
We are honored to have you. So why don't we start this off where we start basically any interview off with, why don't you give us a little bit of your cruising background, as well as how you got started in the cruising industry and how that led to your rise through Royal and to your position as president and CEO of Celebrity.
Okay, let's see. Now we're going to have to go way, way back because next month I'm leaving the company after 39 years. So it's a long journey, but I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. I got into the travel business by mistake. Christy, was really interesting to hear that you went to law school and now you were, I guess, selling travel. And I think sometimes our lives take us in these directions that we don't really expect. And we didn't really plan for it, just like the cruise industry happened for me. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts. I was in hospitality my whole life. My parents owned restaurants. I worked in restaurants, put myself through college in restaurants. After college, I left and went into hotels. I was in sales, convention space, trade show space, events and banquets. And then I just wasn't loving what I was doing. I was in my, I want to say early, maybe mid 20s. And I was thinking, I need to find something. I don't know what I want, but I know I don't have it right now. And I'm going to date myself by saying I was in bed one Sunday reading the Boston Sunday Globe, because way back then, that's how you found a job. You opened the Help Wanted section. There was no LinkedIn.
Lake might not know that because Lake probably wasn't born then. So
I'm sure. And probably a lot of your listeners weren't either. They're like, what's she talking about? But anyway, I saw an ad from Crimson Travel, which is a big agency in New England, especially. They were looking for a cruise specialist. And I just remember thinking, what the heck? Why not? And I applied for that position and I got it. And it was okay. The role I had selling cruises to groups wasn't something that was really, it takes a while to cultivate all of this. So I was getting a little impatient. And one day the salesperson, district sales manager for Royal Caribbean, came in and he told us all he had just gotten promoted. And because we were a top producing agency, he said, if any of you are interested in my job, you should send your resume. And I thought, wow, okay, that's a nice transition. And I sent my resume. It's a long story because they didn't even pick me the first time, but I don't want to go on and on and on. So let it suffice to say, I started as a district sales manager in 1985. 30 years later, after a long and windy road in the company, I ended up being appointed to president and CEO of Celebr. To answer your question about cruising, the vast majority of my cruise experience has been in our company, and I loved it. You know, obviously, I stayed in it for 39 years after never really finding a position that I loved, or a company or a hotel or a property that I loved. It's been an amazing journey.
You talk about your journey in your book, and it's kind of a windy road that you get to the top. And I've been listening to your book on Audible, which is like, listeners out there, this is a great book to listen to, especially if you need any like leadership assistance. We have a lot of runners that listen to our podcast. And so it's great to listen while you're out on a run. It's very inspirational. And I think that the windy road is such a good part to tell, and this isn't about cruising necessarily, but for our kids, because there's not always a straight road to the top or to wherever a person's goal is. And so, yes, I'm just going to interrupt and say, remind our kids that sometimes there's a windy road to get there, but then you can be CEO of a major corporation, which is pretty cool.
Well, you know, I really try to tell people, don't put so much pressure on yourself to think you need to have it all figured out when you're young, because you change, life changes, circumstances change, your desires change as you grow, as you mature, as you learn. You know, I always find the more you can leave yourself open to new experiences and learning new things, the more valuable you become to yourself, a company, your career. And I always tell people who ask my advice, be open, move around, learn new things, because at the end of the day, those things can only help you, just like it helped me. But I learned that later in my career. I wish I knew it earlier in my career.
Well, next question. How has the industry and the perception of cruising changed since your start with Royal? And I know that the answer is quite a bit, I'm sure. But could you talk a little bit about what your first cruise experience was like and compare that, say, to what a more recent one looks like?
Well, you know, I think as you think back over the last almost 40 years, that the industry is completely different than it was back in 1985. And first of all, there's been a lot of consolidation, as we all know, into, you know, from a lot of smaller cruise brands into still a lot of cruise brands, but under just a few big corporate umbrellas. And so that is the one thing that has changed. And again, it's not like other industries. It's not like, unlike the hotel industry, you know, that's just what's happening. There's been a lot of consolidation over time, but there's been so much evolution, so much innovation, so much transformation. You think about the technology on ships now, not even what's available to the guests, but even what's available to the captains on the bridges and how they navigate the ships and the systems they use and the ability that they have to know where they're going and evaluate and navigate. And you think about the technology that consumers have access to that helps them plan their trip and book their cruise and book all of their other experiences. And then, of course, you think about the ships themselves. And they're just, you know, I never thought back when I was starting back in 1985, when I started working for Royal Caribbean, as a district sales manager, the largest ship that we had was the Song of America. We only had 4 ships at the time in the company. Song of America was, I think, either 1,200 or 1,400 guests. And none of those, I mean, so many of the ships that I remember in my career in our company are no longer even part of our company and our brand anymore. The ships got bigger, they got more fun, they became more family friendly. There was more differentiation, like Celebrity in the relaxed luxury space, Silver Seas in the luxury space, Royal Caribbean in the family market, Disney Cruise Line came in, Virgin came in, Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons. So you see all of these different, even hotel brands or big consumer brands getting into the cruise business. It's exploded. It's phenomenal. I never thought that I would see the industry from way back then to where it is today. And it's very exciting.
Have you ever been in the situation or been part of the process of offboarding a cruise ship? And have any of those like hit you like, oh man, I loved that ship?
I have not been in a personal situation. I do know during the pandemic, there were ships that were offboarded. That's a nice word, Lake. I don't know that there was, it's always a tough decision to do those, to make those decisions. But I don't know that people felt that there was a big emotional loss. True, they had a certain role to play in the evolution of a brand. Certainly, they were all in their day, and when they debuted, unbelievably wonderful, successful, innovative at that time. But just like everything, things change, brands change. And if those situations happened, it was probably for a very good reason, and probably because those ships had to be retired, if you will, either through selling post-COVID, that's really difficult, or through offboarding.
Yeah, there was a Celebrity ship like Century, that's not the name of it, but
there was a Century class of ships, Century, Galaxy, and Mercury, and those ships were sold. And they were a great series of ships. But when you think about what's happened with Celebrity beyond those ships, you realize those ships lived a great life. I mean, they are at a certain age where, and it really is driven by consumer demand and what consumers want. They want big, new, and shiny, honestly. So when you start expanding your brand and growing your brand, and you look at the profitability of a brand or a specific ship within a brand, sometimes you need to make decisions that they might not belong in the fleet profile anymore.
Well, since we were talking about new and shiny, something we are very curious about as the president and CEO during the development process and building of the Edge class ships, how involved do you get to be as the CEO in that process? And what influences did you have on those ships?
Very, very, very involved. And a ton of influence. As the steward of the brand, when you're the president and the CEO of the brand, you are not the only person that participates in the designing and building process of a new ship. We have an entire organization of people within our company that leads that. And our chairman and CEO is significantly involved in all of the decisions design of every ship across every brand. But at the end of the day, as the person responsible for the performance of those ships once they hit the market, and the person who's ultimately responsible for the brand and the brand strategy and what the brand stands for and what the brand needs to evolve and innovate and create something that's going to take us into the future in a really positive way, you are involved in every decision, all of the initiatives and strategies around building a ship. How big is it going to be? What's it going to look like? Where's it going to go? Who's going to be the customer? How long is it going to cruise? Who's going to design it? How many bars? How many restaurants? How many public spaces? What's the entertainment? I reviewed every concept of all the shows that were coming. I gave all the feedback. Now, at the end of the day, I was surrounded by an amazing team of people, both inside and outside of Celebrity, who made it all happen. But I was intimately and integrally involved in every single decision. And oh, by the way, it was one of the things I loved most about my job, whether it was in operations with the Solstice class, which Christy, you told me you sailed on a couple of those. The thing for me that was the coolest thing in my whole career was designing and building the Edge series of ships. Those transformed Celebrity and they transformed the industry.
And those ships are comfortable. So way to go,
Thank
because
you.
ships, I've been on some other brands and of newer design ships. So in the last 5 years, these ships have come out and they're not like even the couch, you sit on it and you're like, well, did anybody ever sit on this couch before they released it into the sea? The furniture on your ship is cozy and comfortable and the bedding is it's just, you guys did a good job.
So funny you should say that. We sit or sat, I don't sit anymore because I don't do that anymore. We sat in every single chair before we made a decision. So designers and manufacturers, we used to call them, we had a chair show. And all of the options for the chairs were there for us. And we all sat in them, men, women, different shapes, different sizes, so that we knew those chairs, sofas, whatever, were going to be comfortable for our guests. We laid on the mattresses. We felt the sheets. I looked at every piece of silverware, every dish, every glass. I wanted to make sure every restaurant had its own identity and that because when I thought about the industry, being part of it for 39 years, it was all a sea of sameness. No matter what dining room you went into, you were eating, they might have a different menu, but you're eating off the same dish. You're drinking out of the same glass. The silverware looks the same. I was trying to create unique experiences that truly set Celebrity apart, especially, with our reputation of being the culinary brand. And so, we used to do dining top shows where the team, supply chain and the culinary team would set all the tables so I could see, do you like this candle? Do you like the silverware? How does it feel in your hand? Is it easy to hold? And I mean, I can't even tell you the level of detail that went into designing and building those ships.
This is incredibly fascinating. Swinging it back to Disney Cruise Line, we have 3 new ships on the horizon, and Disney fans love to do what we call armchair Imagineering, where we sit here and we'd be like, oh, this would be cool. What if they did this? It is so fascinating to hear someone who says, yes, what if we did this, but is making it happen. Mm-hmm. It is just amazing. One last question on kind of the ship development. And it doesn't have...
It can't be the last question, Lake. We'll see. We'll see if it's the last question.
There are plenty of other questions that can swing back to this. But is there anything, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the Edge class, but when someone would get on the ship, or when you would go on the ship and you would look and you would point to something and say, that was me. Obviously, the entire ship as a whole is you, but is there that like one little detail where you're like, that was Lisa?
I don't know that I can point to one thing. Like, one of the things people ask me often is, what's your favorite room? What's your favorite venue? What's your favorite space? I know people are looking for an answer, and I know it sounds trite when I say this, but it's so true. It's like the sum of the parts. Instead of looking at one thing, how about I tell you one idea that I can say that was Lisa? My idea for the Edge series, because I had talked to consumers and listened to feedback for so many years that people said cruising isn't for them. Cruise ships aren't for them. They were of a certain ilk or in a certain socio-economical category where they felt like cruising was beneath them. And that's just the reality of how some people feel about cruising. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying I agreed with them, but it was the reality of what I heard. And so what my intention was, and what I worked really hard to do on the Edge series, was to change people's minds. So when I think about the level of design on Celebrity Edge, design in particular, not even architecture, which I had so much to do with as well, as did so many others, but hiring world-renowned designers who had never designed a space on a ship before to make people understand that unbelievably stunning, approachable, elegant, and sophisticated design could happen on a ship as large as the Edge series was something I was determined to do. And so I asked if we were going to do this and it was really going to transform Celebrity, and design was one of our pillars, we need to hire world-renowned designers. And that's how we got people like Kelly Hoppen, Joanne Mancu, Patricia Urquiola, Tom Wright, Nate Berkus, and all of these amazing designers all over the world to work with us on Celebrity Edge. And it became a passion project for them as well.
I love that. It's perfect.
Is there anything in the design process that you were like, maybe that didn't turn out the way we thought? Or does that happen? And then can you think of, I guess, an example like that of?
People ask me that, but and honestly, I sincerely say the answer is no. But there was one space that I knew for so long I really wanted to do a much better job on because I didn't think it lived up to its full potential. And it was, by the way, the most popular spot on the ship, and it was the Sunset Bar. It is the Sunset Bar. And when we designed Edge and Apex, we thought, it was a much better design than any of the other ships. We could start with a clean slate, which is a much bigger area. The design was much lovelier than the other ships. But when Edge was done, and of course, Apex and Edge are sister ships, we couldn't really change much on the second ship. I thought about the third ship, Celebrity Beyond, and it's a stretch of Edge. It's a little higher and a little longer. The Sunset Bar was dramatically changed architecturally because we got another half deck. It was a terrace bar. It's like absolutely magnificent. I don't know. You were on Beyond, right?
Yeah.
So you know that, Christy. And so I went to Nate Berkus and said, I would love for you to design the Sunset Bar. And he did a spectacular job. So when I got on Beyond, what I will say to answer that question is I looked at the Sunset Bar and I said, we finally nailed it. And that was the one space I really, really had higher aspirations for. And we were able to accomplish those aspirations with the wonderful Nate Berkus, and he did both Beyond and also Ascent.
I still have to figure out when and how I'm getting on the Ascent, and I will because I love a good new ship smell. So the first two Edge class ships are the same footprint, and then the third, she grew a little bit like we discussed for the Beyond. Just because I'm curious, and I feel like our listeners would be too, when do you guys know that you're going to change the design of the third ship? Like, do you know that before the first ship even sails? How does that process work from intercompany workings?
So I don't know what chapter it's in. I know you're listening to the book and I know you haven't gotten all the way through it. But one of the things that you'll find out as you listen to more of it is that when I got the opportunity to be president and CEO, and I also got the opportunity to have a really big influence in redesigning what was already designed so that it could be more compelling and turn out to be the Edge series that we all know and love. As we were working our way through the ship and designing it, one of the things I could not change when I came into the role was the structure, the physical structure of the ship. Any changes we made had to inside the initial structure. And I remember saying to the head of New Build, our executive vice president of New Build and Architecture, that I wish the ship was a little bigger. And it would give us more opportunity to create some compelling spaces or larger spaces that I felt would be really great for our guests, our experience, and our brand. And what he said to me was, I agree with you, but he said, we can't do that until number 3. So the first 2 ships with the shipyard are pretty much, once you design the first one, the second one comes so quickly after that, you really can't change it. But then what we decided is we would change number 3, which became Celebrity Beyond, and then Beyond and Ascent are sisters. Mm-hmm. So you've got Edge and Apex, pretty much exactly the same, maybe different decor, different artwork, and then Beyond and Ascent, the same thing. And then what will end up happening with Edge 5 is that the physical structure will, again, still be the same as Beyond and Ascent, and I'm not there anymore, or part of that process anymore, but there'll probably be some new surprises because that is the last in the original Edge series of ships. It is cool.
And it was so well thought out, the Edge. Like even the retreat section, yep. I'm a good retreat lover. Yeah. I can't always get in the retreat, but if I can, I'm working my way there. And it was just so well thought out. So even the little things like the Edge Villa, I got to do a week in the Edge Villa, and it was because the day that the Edge ships went on sale, I booked. And my husband and I were like, should we try this? And I said, we made a budget. And of course you were slightly over the budget because they always are. But I was like, it's not enough. And I can $1,000 myself to death all over it. So we booked it. The next day, it was $6,000 more for that cabin than what I paid opening hour. But like you walk outside on that top floor of the Edge Villa, in the bar, in the retreat, in the lounge, it's just like right there.
Right there. Yep.
Right there.
Yep. Right there. So that was, again, the level of detail that we thought through, I described a little bit of it earlier. No one has any idea. And I don't believe that others do the same thing. Honestly, it was, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if out of the bedroom you could walk out onto the retreat deck? So let's put a door there, and then there's the bar and there's all the, the beautiful pool and the chaise lounges. And please, did Kelly Hoppen not do the most amazing job designing those suites, the Lumine restaurant, the retreat sun deck, the retreat lounge? I mean, you walk in these spaces, they're stunning, but they're not stunning in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable or, oh, I don't want to sit on that chair. They're welcoming, they're beautiful, they're elegant. I mean, clearly that series of ships was the pinnacle of my career, and I couldn't be more proud of them. And people say, what's the proudest, thing that ever happened in your career? And it's the introduction of the Edge series, honestly. And again, it was transformational for Celebrity, but it was transformational for the industry. And I remember people telling me all the time when I was rebranding Celebrity, repositioning Celebrity, building the Edge series of ships, you can't deliver in the cruise industry, you can't deliver luxury at scale. And I look at Celebrity and the Edge series, especially as luxury at scale, whether you're in the retreat or not in the retreat, right? And what I said is, I don't buy it. If Las Vegas can deliver luxury at scale, the cruise industry can deliver luxury at scale. And that's what we set out to accomplish.
And the whole modern luxury, I mean, you redesigned, I'm not sure if that's the right word. Redefined. Yeah. Celebrity Cruises. It was amazing. Okay, I have another question related to being CEO and these ships coming out. Were you so when the launches occurred, so Celebrity Edge, I actually won 2 different preview cruises, one as a travel agent and one as a consumer, and they ended up being back to back. So when I flew from Michigan, it just worked. I screamed when I got those messages that I won those cruises. But the second cruise, when I was a travel advisor that I had won, we were in a Sky Suite and it had that open concept bathroom and the shower went everywhere. And we went through so many towels because the water literally just filled the entire bathroom floor. Do you hear about that when it's happening?
Yeah.
And by the next day, they were starting to come up with a solution. They put a little ledge up. Yep. And then I think before, when that cruise was over, they put a whole wall up.
We could sit here and talk about ship design and designing new ships all day. I do want to turn this back to a rather more serious matter. And I believe this is a very impactful section of your book as well. But of course, we had several years where ships on any cruise line were not sailing. Yes, we're going to talk about the dark times, the pandemic here. What was it like leading the company through the pandemic, and how did you keep your employees motivated during this time of no sailing?
It was really hard. I think I did my best to describe the situation and how we were all feeling and how the 20,000 people that worked specifically for Celebrity were feeling. And the way people were feeling at Celebrity was no different than the way they were feeling all over the company, whether they were on a brand or in one of the shared services groups or any of our other colleagues across the entire industry. We were all helpless. We couldn't control what was happening. There were a lot of people making decisions for our industry and our business that we might not have agreed with, but we needed to comply with. How's that? I just woke up every day during that 15 months wondering what I could do differently as a leader to keep people hopeful, inspired, confident, and focused on the future instead of focused on what our current situation was, which was really quite terrible. I don't think any of us would have thought that we would have been in the situation that we were in ever in our lives and in our careers. I thought a lot about how I needed to pivot how I thought and how I led during that time, whether it was being more transparent and communicative with video messages to our crew that were spread all over the world, hoping that they were going to get their jobs back so they could support their families again. I was on Zoom doing all hands meetings all the time with all the celebrity employees. I was working with my own leadership team and the broader leadership team. And I really wanted everybody to sort of regroup and refocus. So I thought it would be a good idea to focus on our future, not our current state. And so there's a section in the book called "The Comeback is going to be stronger than the setback." And one of the quotes that I have in the book is from Winston Churchill: "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And I thought, okay, this is a crisis and I'm not going to waste it. When do you ever get 15 months to take a breath, to stop, to reevaluate, to reimagine, to recreate, to re-strategize? And that's what I did. And that was our rallying cry: the comeback is going to be stronger than the setback. And we did a lot of different things during that time. We thought about how we would reposition our brand, how we would reprice our brand to become all included, how we would talk about celebrity and maybe think differently about modern luxury, new luxury, relaxed luxury. How do we want to, reemerge from this? And, what do we want consumers to think about us? And then how are we going to turn that into incredible demand when we were finally able to start back up again? So I dialed down all that hard driving, pressure filled. How much business did we book today? How much money are we making today? To come on, guys, we're going to get through this. There's hope. Have confidence. We're going to come back. And when we do, we're going to be even better than when we left. And that's really the mantra that I lived by during those 15 months. And oh, by the way, it got me through it too, because don't think that on any given day I woke up after the shutdown kept going on and on and on and on, that I wondered some days, is this ever going to end? Is our industry and our business ever going to come back? So I had to refocus myself too and my energy in a really positive way.
Obviously, the pandemic itself is not a positive experience, but with all the time and changes you were able to make during that time for the comeback, what would you say would be your most influential change or most positive change that happened that may not have been implemented if you hadn't had that break?
Yeah, all of the things I just talked about: our brand positioning, our all-included pricing strategy, how we talked about our brand, how we defined our brand. None of that, I don't know if it never would have happened, but it certainly probably would have taken a longer amount of time. We were doing work and with a luxury consultant that wanted to engage, because we wanted the brand, as these Edge series of ships came out, to not be luxury, because we're not luxury. We're not small. We're not ultra luxury, but we wanted to, create this category of one that I like to call it. And it's between the premium and luxury cruise space. And that's why it was called relaxed luxury and resorts at sea, because these are big floating resorts. They're not little boutique hotels, that, have just 30 or 50 rooms. So I don't know that we never would have done it. I don't think that it would be right for me to say that. But it gave me a great opportunity to refocus a team during a time that they really needed to be refocused and focusing on our future, and the fact that we actually did have one.
This was one of the parts of the book that brought me little tears in my eyes, just like your retelling of it, thinking back to when it happened. And really, I feel like as the head of the company, you had to have given that go ahead for the crew that were on the ships to sort of even empower themselves to make their own environment. I remember videos coming out and pictures of the crew making, like, the bakery team making different still cakes and pastries and all these like beautiful things for the crew that were still on the ship. But even when you were talking about like getting the last crew member that was not going to remain on during that period home and getting the guests home, I didn't realize that even getting the guest home was that lengthy of a process until the book. So I know we have a lot of like cruise fans that listen just in general. They have to listen to this book or read it, obviously, because it's just so interesting to listen. Celebr was out there during this time. They were publicly sharing what was happening on the ships. Was that something that like somebody says, hey, can we do this? And you give the go ahead to? Because nobody else's lines were sharing anything positive about the experience of the crew on the ship still.
Well, that was a corporate decision. It wasn't just a brand decision, because, those decisions are, we were all as a collective leadership team talking every single day. And one of the things that was really troublesome to us was the job the press was doing on the industry. There was nothing that we wanted more than for our crew members to go home, but they couldn't go home. We chartered planes. We spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to charter planes to get our crew home. The crew would be on the way to the airport, and we would get a call that the airports in the home countries they were going to were shut down. And once again, we had to disappoint them and tell them they weren't going home and turn those buses around and bring them back to the ships. And so we wanted to control the narrative a little bit about what was really happening and what we were really doing for our crew, because we, once again felt that we were probably being unfairly treated by the press, because what they were doing is they were searching for and actually putting out messages for crew members to get in touch with them and talk about their plight, their horrible plight. The one
person from Carnival who had a bad moment and a bad mental place at that time, and that was the loudest person talking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, they were contacting all the cruise lines. Sure. And, I'm not saying that those people weren't unhappy and that the situation was really untenable for them and they just wanted to go home. We knew that. But to think that that was all that was happening and that the cruise lines weren't going above and beyond to really take care of our crew members actually was personally insulting and really heartbreaking for me. Because if you also, as you get further through the book, you'll realize that of all the things that I loved about my career, the crew was at the top of the list. And so for people to imply that we didn't care about our crew and we weren't taking good care of our crew was just really, for me, incomprehensible.
Wow. Like I said, and as Christy has explained too, very impactful segment of your book. I mean, very impactful for all of us, really. But for cruise fans, we all know that this was a very hard time during the cruise industry. So why don't we turn this ship around a little bit and go back to some fun and positives?
One of the things I remember vividly during the dark days was Captain Kate showing a video of them running through, flushing the toilets, and her bug, the cat running through the ship too, because this memory is in my head, is a perfect time. Let's talk about Captain Kate, the captain with the most Instagram followers, right? And most TikTok, the following, I guess. Can you talk a minute about bringing Captain Kate over to Celebrity Cruises? And then for the listeners, I think some of them know she was actually in Disney Cruise Line first. And then she got taken over by Royal Caribbean. So, and then can you talk to us about bringing her to Celebrity Cruises?
Sure. You think about all the decisions you've made in your career and you think about all the people you've met in your career, and there are a few that stand out really at the top of the list. I think she's probably at the top of the list. So when I met Captain Kate, I was Executive Vice President of Operations for Royal Caribbean. It was 2013, I believe, that I met her, because I started in that role in 2012 and our conference was in 2013. At that time, she wasn't a captain. She was a staff captain, second in command, had a lot of her captain's licenses, but not the job. And she had different responsibilities than the actual captain. When I was put in the role of Executive Vice President at Royal Caribbean, I was very focused on sort of cultural things that we could do to change the experience a little bit. I had made some changes on the leadership team. I was working on the culture and getting people rallied around a different culture and how we could do our business a little differently. And some people loved that and some people didn't love that. And when I met Captain Kate and when I went in the room after that 1 year on the job, and there were all hotel directors and captains, Captain Kate was there as a staff captain because there were a handful of staff captains that were invited to be at this conference because all of the captains were driving the ships. And so staff captains, really high potential staff captains, were offered the opportunity to come. So Captain Kate was very excited about that because she couldn't wait to meet me, because as a woman on the bridge as staff captain, she was really excited that a woman was leading the operation, because I was the first woman in the company to ever do that. And she took the opportunity during a break to come up to me and thank me, congratulate me, tell me how happy she was. A woman was in charge. She believed in everything I was doing. She applauded the cultural changes that I was making. She even created a coin for her crew that had one of the sayings that find a way or make a way, which was, one of my leadership values that I talked about a lot. And she had a coin made for her entire crew that said that. So I was very touched by that. And she really impressed me. So I did a little digging and a little research, and I realized that she was a staff captain. She had been appointed and promoted to staff captain probably 9 years prior. And I think she was the top rated staff captain, 13 contracts in a row.
Wow.
So she was like a rock star. So she wasn't just an amazing human being that truly impressed me. She was an amazing navigator. And she obviously had to be an amazing leader because the staff captain has a lot of responsibility for the crew. So for the captains to always be rating her at the top of the list of staff captains, she had to be phenomenal. So I used to ask the gentleman in charge of the captains as captain opportunities came up, and we had to promote staff captains either because the fleet was growing or captains were retiring. What about Kate? What about Kate? So he kept telling me her time will come. And then a year later, I was appointed to president and CEO of Celebr. And guess what? Captain Kate's time did come because as the first president and CEO of Celebr, I needed a woman captain.
Yes.
And I talked to the gentleman who came with me to run Marine for Celebr, who was a very good friend of Captain Kate's. I said, could you please call her and see if she would be willing to come on this journey with me and if she would be interested in being a captain at Celebr? And he called her and she said, hell yes. And so that was like the first big move that I did as a woman president and CEO. And to this day, Captain Kate is still the only American woman at the helm of a mega cruise ship. And to your point, she's extraordinary. The crew love her. The guests love her. She has over 3 million followers on social media. She's a great recruiter for our brand. She's a wonderful friend of mine. I just think the world of Captain Kate. She's amazing.
In your book, in the foreword, you say, or it states, teach your daughters more, and this is in relation to a quote to your nieces, teach your daughters more about shattering the glass ceiling and less about fitting into the glass slipper.
Yep.
And, you really elevated celebrity in working on that glass ceiling, honestly, because I've been cruising since I was 7. So my whole life, really, right? Every time they'll have all of the department heads standing up to speak to the guests, it's all men. And then you brought women forward. And, we had already had a cruise booked, but your International Women's Day cruise, like I was on just 2 weeks before. I would have, if I hadn't booked 2 years ago, this other cruise cabin that, I'd already had set up with my good price, right? It was just so fascinating that you used your powers, right? To make it so that every department head could be a woman.
And our bridge was 100% manned by women, 100%.
It's amazing. And nothing got crashed into. Mr. Men out there in the world that think that women can't be in charge.
Well, funny enough, a gentleman that I know that's a huge supporter of mine and a friend, when I announced International Women's Day cruise on Celebrity Edge with 100% of the bridge manned by women, he sent me a note and he said, congratulations. And he said, that took courage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what do you mean that took courage? I was a little taken aback by that. I didn't even think of that. I'm like, are you saying that, oh my God, I got all women on the bridge, something could happen? Or people could think something could happen? I'm like, what are you talking about? Are you assuming I put 100% of women on the bridge and they're not capable of navigating that ship for a week or forever? And that's just, and it was an unintended comment. He genuinely and authentically meant that as a compliment. And I'm like, oh my God, it just shows you how we still have a long way to go.
We really do. And that was one of the things when I sent the request for you to come on the show. I said, the fact that you've done these, you've made these things happen, and it's paving the way for all of the future generations. And it just has to get better, I hope. that we can have more women at the table. How else is it going to work, right? Like it's relating to us. We need to be at the table. So I just so truly appreciate what you've done to bring the women to the table.
Thank you.
The results speak for themselves, and I hope that number only continues to grow. And obviously, Kate continues to be a great advocate for that, even as you transition out of the cruise line industry. Great and amazing progress that you have really cultivated in the cruise culture.
Yep. And she sent me a picture very recently, maybe a week or two ago. There was a woman from Cameroon, Kenya, and Ghana on her bridge. 70% of the bridge team were women. She had nothing to do with it. It just happened that way. 3 of them were women of color. And she sent me the note and she said, "We're living your legacy."
Aww.
That's beautiful.
And that is beautiful.
You need to save that.
Oh my God, I will forever. But that to me was like, that fills my cup. You know, that's what I love the most about what I was able to do. I mean, Edge series, financial transformation, brand transformation, everything was so wonderful. But when I get a photo like that and a comment like that from Captain Kate, a woman I have so much admiration and respect for, and she says, "We're living your legacy," that just does it for me.
Love it. Well, we are getting close to the end here. I have just a couple more questions, and we don't need to go super into high detail here. I am going to bring it back to cruise line industry a little bit. What do you think of the current state of cruise line design and new innovations to come? Is there anything about like what any other companies are doing that intrigue you? And do you feel like when it comes to cruise ship design, bigger is necessarily always better?
I don't know about, I'll start with the end on bigger is always better. I think that's up to everybody's individual preference, right? Because, you know, for years we've been saying, oh, you know, it's too big, or what's too big. It really is about what the consumer wants. At the end of the day, we all run brands, we all, you know, appeal to consumers. And I really think it's up to the consumer to make that decision of what's the best vacation for them. What I would say about the cruise industry, as I am starting my last month before I transition out of it, is what I see is that everybody has upped their game. Everybody is, you know, I will say that the company that I've been a part of for 39 years is at the top of the heap as it relates to brand innovation, cruise ship innovation, doing things on ships people never thought possible. We have led the way. It's another thing I'm very proud of, for being part of the Royal Caribbean Group for 39 years. But what I will also say is other brands are out there, like stepping up their own game, doing their own thing, making cruises more relevant for younger generations, for families, for multi-generational families. So I still believe in the cruise industry. I still think it's a phenomenal way to vacation. I have a great deal of admiration and respect for all the brands that are out there, including the ones I was talking about earlier that are entering the market that you never thought at another point in time they would have entered the market. That says a lot about the validity of the cruise industry and the consumer acceptance of cruising as a viable vacation option. So I think the industry is great, and I think it's going to continue to get better.
All right. Well, that will turn me to one of my final questions. Actually, a question that I ask every guest on this show, but I think you will probably have some different, or maybe a more unique answer. I always love to highlight the crew interactions. You know, obviously the crew makes the show happen for the guests day in and day out. Could you tell us about any notable or special crew interactions you've had that have surprised you?
Oh my God, they're countless. You know, one of the things that I still love is when people come back from Celebr. I haven't been with Celebr since the end of last April of 2023, the end. I stepped down, and they tell me the crew still misses me. And what I would say is that is the culmination. That sentiment is a culmination of many years of ensuring the crew knew how much I cared about them, how much I valued them, how much I did for them. I made it a point to always interact with the crew. I made it a point to never have the crew feel intimidated by my presence or the fact that I was coming on a ship. I wanted them to know that I worked for them. They didn't work for me. I wanted them to know that without them, our brand was nothing, and our guests wouldn't be happy and they wouldn't come back. I wanted them to know I had a tremendous amount of respect for them and valued them. In my book, I say it's the boomerang theory of leadership, and you get back what you give. And that crew that I got a chance to work with for so many years gave me everything they had. And I will be forever grateful for that.
Awesome. All right. Well, then our last question for you is, what's next for you?
I can't tell you. How's that? You're going to have to invite me back. Listen, when I decided to step down, it was after a lot of soul searching, after a couple of years of COVID. If you've listened or read my book, I lost my sister during the same time. Those were life-altering events that have forever impacted me. I was never going to leave the industry during that time because I didn't come that far to only come that far. I say that in the book. I wanted to get the brand back. I wanted us to be sailing full steam ahead, chapter 10 in my book. And when we finally were there, and when I am a certain age, and you can, my age is public knowledge. It's everywhere in Royal Caribbean proxies and AutoNation. I'm on the board there in their proxy. It was time, chronologically with my age, it was time. And after all I had done and accomplished, there really was nothing left to prove. I was leaving behind an amazing legacy. And I'm like, okay, it's time maybe to do nothing. But little did I know that when I decided to do that, I was going to realize, while I might be done with that, I'm not done. And I have a few things up my sleeves. I'll be making some announcements at the end of April, but I'm really looking forward with anticipation and excitement to the new chapter, or the next chapter in my life, after having had such an amazing first chapter.
Well, speaking of chapters, though, we do know one thing that is ongoing for you. Would you like to talk a little bit more about your book before we close out the show?
Sure. Thank you, Lake. I really appreciate it. Making Waves, we've talked a little bit about it. It's a leadership book on the lessons I learned, and it's a subtitle is A Woman's Rise to the Top Using Smarts, Heart, and Courage. And I really view my career as a combination of those three things that got me from district sales manager in 1985 to president and CEO of Celebrity Cruises, first in our company, one of the first in the industry, in 2014, December of 2014. So it was a 30-year journey. And I really wrote the book, not because I ever thought I would be an author, but because so many people told me I needed to write a book. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hoping about Making Waves is the same thing I've hoped through and worked on through my entire career. I hope it makes a difference in people's lives. I hope people might take a few, or many lessons from the book. I hope it's helpful as they navigate their own lives and careers. And it's available anywhere books are sold, Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. And I hope people read it, and I hope they enjoy it, and I hope they get something out of it.
I know I already have. And so I can't wait to keep reading it. And we wish you the best in your next endeavors. And I am always in love with a good what's next. So I can't wait to see what that's going to be. And thank you again for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. This has been an amazingly wonderful and enjoyable conversation. I truly appreciated it.
Well, that is all we can hope for here at the DCL podcast. But Christy, that seems like a great place to bring us out. Lisa, thank you again so much for coming on the show. I am so excited for our guests to get to listen to this episode, not only to hear about your career and Celebrity Cruise Line, but all of just the great things that we've talked about in the cruise line industry as a whole. I think this has been a really great conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is going to do it for this episode of the DCL podcast, and we will see you next time, guys. See ya.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
The DCL podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.